What if the thing you're most proud of is actually what's killing your startup? I've helped over 1,000 founders grow their startups, and this is one of the most dangerous patterns I see again and again. I made the same mistake myself with my startup, Cloudfire. I followed every best practice, ran a perfect process, stayed disciplined, and still wasted 9 months building the wrong business model. The hard truth is that your greatest strength can actually become your biggest blind spot. But once you know where to look, you can flip that hidden constraint into a competitive advantage. In this video, I'll walk through the 5-step constraint identification system I use with founders, plus a trusted questions framework that turns limitations into launchpads. Hi there, if you're new to this channel, my name is Maurya. I'm an entrepreneur and author and the creator of the popular one-page business modeling tool, Lean Canvas, used by millions of founders around the world. What I've found over the years is that 90% of founders optimize to their strengths, but it's actually the constraints that strangle their growth. This costs months of misdirected effort because they are solving the wrong problems with the right skills. Today, I'll show you how to systematically identify constraint patterns, apply propelling questions for breakthrough thinking, and transform your bottlenecks into unfair advantages. So Cloudfire taught me this lesson quite expensively. I did everything by the book: customer interviews, demo cell build, MVP, even got 500 paying customers at $50 a year. I was proud of following the systematic process. But when I pitched to investors, a friend did a 5-minute calculation that changed everything. To reach investor level numbers, I'd need millions of leads because my pricing model was too low. My strength, building products, created a constraint. I was systematically building the wrong business model. Every strength creates a constraint elsewhere. That's just the nature of systems. Systematic execution constrains broader business model exploration. Deep customer focus can constrain your market size, and deep technical or domain knowledge can constrain customer understanding. In my case, I got a lucky break. A wedding photographer reached out to me wanting a pro version of my product. The exact same product, but a different customer segment at 12x the pricing turned my unviable business model into a viable one. Now, I could have done that math 9 months earlier before building anything and saved enormous time along the way. That's when I rediscovered the theory of constraints and adapted it for startups and business models. The basic idea is to systematically identify the single bottleneck or constraint limiting your business model and then focus 80% of your resources on breaking that. This is how you avoid spreading yourself thin on too many suboptimal initiatives and instead practice right action, right time. Here's the 5-step process for putting this into action. Step 1, map your customer factory. Every business is a system of converting unaware visitors into happy paying customers. And so the first order of business is to map your 5 core steps. The first one is acquisition. This is how people discover you. Then activation. This is the first valuable experience they have with your product. Retention. This is them coming back for more. Revenue. This is where you convert them from users into paying customers. And finally, referral, spreading the word. Step 2, baseline your metrics. You can't optimize something you don't measure. I recommend starting simple and tracking weekly metrics on a spreadsheet or using a simple template like this one. I'll link this template in the description below for you if you're interested. I find that it only takes a couple of weeks until you start seeing consistent patterns. That's when you're ready to move on to step 3. This is where you find your single constraint. Working backward from happy customers, identify where you're losing the most people. Plugging this leak helps keep more users flowing through your customer factory. The other place to focus on where most people don't look is where your users are piling up. It's easy to illustrate this concept with a popular freemium product. The constraint here is not losing people, but rather moving them from free users to paying customers. Now, constraints only tell you where to focus. To break the constraint, you have to implement the next step. Step 4, getting to root cause. You don't want to simply guess at solutions to your constraints because most initial solutions are often going to be wrong. Instead, you need to do some further discovery by digging into your data or interviewing customers to uncover why the constraint exists in the first place. Once you know why, you can then turn these insights into evidence-based experiments, which brings us to the final step, step 5, test and reassess. If you have picked the right solution, you should see a noticeable spike in your customer factory dashboard. If you do, double down on your solution until you break the constraint. the last thing to realize is that constraints will move around. Like a factory floor, once you start optimizing your slowest machine, at some point it won't be the slowest machine. That's your cue to refocus your attention again to the next slowest machine or bottleneck or constraint in your business model. Now, this isn't just theory. It's the same systematic approach I have used successfully in my own products and with startup founders to help them focus their limited resources on the most impactful activities for driving their ideas and traction forward. Now, you might be thinking, all this is great once I have a product with users and customers, but what if I'm just starting? I have no customers, no metrics, no factory to analyze. Where's my constraint? You still have a constraint, and here's how to think about it. When you're just starting with a promising new idea, your constraint is technically outside your product or outside the customer factory. You don't yet have a customer flow problem, you have a customer factory starting problem. In other words, you need to get the customer factory cranking. So the first constraint or step to focus on is actually acquisition. Now, this may seem obvious on the surface, but it's actually not when you look at what founders actually do. Most founders get trapped into thinking that they need to first build a product to acquire customers, but that's backwards, expensive, and completely unnecessary. What if I told you there's a way to start acquiring customers before you build anything? What if you could validate demand and generate revenue without a working product? That's where constraint-driven innovation comes in. Instead of asking for more resources, you ask better questions. More specifically, you ask a propelling question. Instead of asking for more resources, ask this instead. How do I achieve my goal without acquiring more of my limiting resource? For early stage founders facing the acquisition constraint, the propelling question becomes, how do I get customers without a finished product? The answer to that is demo, sell, build. A critical step to building any product is first designing it. Now, instead of going from design to build, why not first socialize your design with promising prospects? But don't just settle for encouragement from them to keep going. Try to convert them into pre-order paying customers. That's the essence of demo, sell, build, and how you jumpstart acquisition without first building a product. Let's see how these map into the customer factory next. Step 1, you don't need a working product, but a compelling, unique value proposition to jumpstart acquisition. That's the key insight. This also is your first constraint. If you can't get anyone to want to see a demo, having a working product won't change a thing, so you need to focus on first getting people to the demo. This is where you don't need a working product, but rather a unique value proposition which promises value. Now, getting to a compelling, unique value proposition often requires customer discovery work, where you first research and uncover where your customers are struggling in order to craft a compelling promise of something better that will grab their attention. Now, once you can get enough people to want to see your demo, your customer factory is now alive, and your next constraint shifts to activation. This is where your demo comes in. Can you show them something compelling that promises enough value to keep them engaged? You measure that engagement or retention with follow-up conversations, or if you're building something more complex, referrals to other influencers and decision makers in the buying process, where you attempt to activate them too. Now remember, users piling up is a source of a constraint, and so your next constraint quickly shifts from activating people, your prospects in these interviews, to converting or closing them into trials or pilots, ideally paid pilots if you can. This is how you get started with a constraint-driven approach pre-product. Now, once your product or MVP is built, you move your closed deals into a second customer factory, where you now measure product-level activation or first experiences, retention, referral, and revenue. Think of the first factory as the customer acquisition factory and the second as the customer success factory. You need both to build a working business model, but as I showed you, tackling everything can be overwhelming. You can actually build out the entire system systematically, one step at a time. Now let's go to Steve, our virtual reality startup founder. He too applied this exact approach in his startup. Being a technical founder, his natural strength, like mine, was building products. But remember that a working product isn't usually the first constraint. Like many founders, Steve spent the first 9 months building out his platform until he met his mentor, Mary, who completely changed his trajectory. Instead of asking for more development time and resources to finish his product, Steve began to ask, how do I prove market demand without finishing the full product? Following the customer factory approach, Mary helped Steve map his first constraint to designing his business model to ensure it could even hit his startup goals in the first place. This is where he explored many different business model variants with the same idea, but different customer segment and price point combinations to finally settle on architects. He then talked to a dozen architects to understand their struggles and set up follow-up meetings to pitch his product as a solution to their problems, which resulted in him securing 15 paid pilots at $5,000 a month over the next 3 months. Not only did this validate demand for his product, but these conversations also helped him shape his product roadmap. Instead of building a general purpose platform for everyone, he prioritized the right features for his MVP and launched just 2 months later. Okay, so what I've shown you here is the framework overview from my constraint-driven methodology, but systematically identifying constraints and then transforming them into competitive advantages requires some deeper analysis tools. If you haven't downloaded my constraint-driven toolkit, you can grab it in the description below. Even if you have previously downloaded it, you might want to get the latest version, which includes the dual customer factory template I showed you earlier. This is where you can start baselining your business model metrics. It also includes the propelling questions framework and the theory of constraints implementation system. And if you're an early stage startup founder and, like Steve, want to first ensure that you're working on the right idea or business model in the first place, check out my business model design challenge that I'll also link below. For next week, I'm going to cover one of the top reasons behind startup success that most founders ignore: timing your idea. Too many founders live in the future and as a result end up launching too early to market. Being too early to market that isn't ready is precisely why statistically most first movers fail. In the next video, I'll show you a 5-minute market timing test that stress tests your idea's timing. It's the same systematic analysis that would have prevented my first 3 product failures. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss it. Thanks for watching, and until next time, take care.